The sound of Andrea's wine glass hitting my antique mahogany table made my fingers twitch. She'd been doing it all evening, that deliberate, sharp tap, tap, tap that screamed for attention. I caught her eye across the family dinner table, and there it was, that smirk I'd grown to despise since Germain's passing 6 months ago. My name is Paris, and this was supposed to be a simple Sunday dinner, but nothing had been simple since I lost my husband. This house has such potential, Andrea announced, swirling her red wine. Just imagine what it could be with the right updates. Her eyes swept across the living room, past the family photos Germain and I had carefully arranged over our 15 years together. I stabbed my fork into the roasted chicken I'd spent hours preparing. The house is perfect as it is. Oh, honey. Andrea's patronizing tone made my best friend Brooke shift uncomfortably beside me. You can't possibly maintain this place on your own. I mean, look at that wallpaper in the foyer. It's practically screaming for a renovation. The wallpaper Germain and I had picked out together during our first year of marriage. I took a slow sip of water, willing my voice to stay steady. I managed just fine. For now, Andrea said, her voice dripping with false concern. She turned to her husband, Tom. Remember what Mom always said about this place? How it should stay in the family? The table grew quiet. Even the clinking of silverware stopped. Andrea, Greta, my older sister, warned from the other end of the table. But Andrea was on a roll. Let's be realistic here. She leaned forward, her designer bracelet catching the light. Once you're gone, this house will be mine. It's what Germain would have wanted, keeping it in the blood family. The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Brooke's hand found mine under the table, squeezing gently. Germain's wishes, I repeated, my voice barely above a whisper. That's interesting, considering the conversations we had before he passed. Andrea's perfectly plucked eyebrows drew together. What conversations? I stood up, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor. Would anyone like coffee? I just got a new French press. I'll help, Eliza, my neighbor, quickly offered. She followed me into the kitchen, closing the door behind us. You okay? She whispered, reaching for the coffee beans. I gripped the counter, letting out a shaky breath. You know what Germain told me right before? My voice caught. He said, Paris, don't let them change what we built. Promise me. Eliza touched my arm. Then don't. Back in the dining room, Andrea was holding court. It's just practical thinking. A single woman living in this huge house. It doesn't make sense. What doesn't make sense, I said, setting down the coffee tray with deliberate care, is assuming you know anything about what Germain wanted. I'm his sister, Andrea shot back. I knew him his whole life. And I was his wife. I poured coffee into Greta's cup, my hand steady despite the rage building inside me. The person he chose to build a life with. The one he trusted with everything. Everything. Andrea's laugh was sharp. Please, you were just the girl he married. This house, it's Miller family history. It belongs with us. I thought about the documents sitting in my study upstairs. The ones Germain and I had prepared with Walter, our family lawyer, months before his diagnosis. The ones that would wipe that smug look off Andrea's face. More coffee, Andrea? I asked sweetly. She pushed her cup forward. You know I'm right, Paris. Deep down, you know this house will be mine once you're gone. It's inevitable. I smiled, thinking of the shelter plans hidden in my desk drawer. The women whose lives would change because of Germain's vision, our vision. We'll see about that. Later, after everyone had left, I stood in the foyer, running my fingers over the wallpaper Andrea had criticized. Germain and I had spent 3 weekends putting it up, laughing at our amateur attempts, celebrating with takeout pizza on the floor. My phone buzzed, a text from Brooke. You okay? That was intense. I typed back, better than okay. It's almost time. Upstairs in my study, I pulled out the folder marked Future Plans. Inside were the documents that would change everything, the proof that Germain and I had been planning this for years. Andrea thought she knew everything about her brother, but she had no idea what was coming. I traced Germain's signature on the last page, remembering his words. Make it count, Paris. Show them what real family means. Oh, I would. And Andrea wouldn't know what hit her. The morning after the disastrous dinner, I met Eliza at our usual coffee spot downtown. She arrived with a stack of papers tucked under her arm, her lawyer face on. I've reviewed everything, she said, sliding into the booth. The documentation is solid, Paris. Andrea won't be able to touch it. I wrapped my hands around my coffee mug, letting the warmth seep into my fingers. But we need to move fast. The sooner we file these papers, the better. The bell above the cafe door chimed, and I tensed as Brooke rushed in, her face flushed. You won't believe what I just heard, she said, dropping into the seat beside me. Andrea's been making calls to real estate agents. Already? My stomach clenched. The body's barely cold, and she's... Paris. Eliza's firm voice cut through my rising anger. Focus. We need to talk about the letter. I pulled the envelope from my purse. The one Germain had given to Walter to hold until after his death. I'd received it yesterday morning, but hadn't found the courage to open it yet. Read it, Brooke urged, squeezing my hand. My fingers trembled as I broke the seal. My dearest Paris, if you're reading this, then I'm gone, and knowing my sister, she's probably already circling like a vulture. Remember that night we sat on the porch swing, talking about turning the house into something more? That wasn't just a dream, it was our legacy. I've left everything prepared with Walter. The house isn't just a building, Paris. It's hope. It's shelter. It's everything we believed in. Don't let Andrea's greed destroy that. All my love, Germain. Damn, Brooke whispered, wiping her eyes. He knew exactly what would happen. He knew his sister, I said, carefully folding the letter, and he trusted me to finish what we started. Eliza spread out the shelter plans on the table. These blueprints are perfect. The conversion will be minimal. Mostly just adding security systems and updating the bathrooms. We can have it ready within months. Andrea will lose it when she finds out, Brooke said, studying the plans. That's what worries me, I admitted. She's not going to go down without a fight. The cafe door opened again, and we quickly gathered the papers as Greta walked in. She spotted us and made her way over, her expression serious. We need to talk, she said, sliding into the booth. Andrea's been asking questions about your finances, Paris. She's trying to build a case that you can't afford the property taxes. Of course she is. I pulled out my phone and showed them the text I'd received that morning from Walter. Meeting set for Thursday. Bringing all documentation. Stay strong. Thursday. Eliza's eyebrows shot up. That's perfect timing. The family gathering is Saturday. Exactly. I allowed myself a small smile. Andrea wants to play chess? Fine, but she doesn't know all the pieces on the board. Paris, Greta leaned forward, her voice low. Are you sure about this? Once you do this, there's no going back. The family will never be the same. The family changed the moment Andrea started plotting against me, I said. Besides, Germain and I planned this for years. This house was never meant to be just a house. My phone buzzed, a text from Andrea. Coming by later to discuss the property. Need to talk about practical solutions. She's unbelievable, Brooke muttered, reading over my shoulder. No, I replied, standing up. She's predictable, and that's exactly why this is going to work. I gathered my things, determination settling over me like armor. Eliza, get those papers filed today. Brooke, I need you to make some calls about the shelter permits. Greta, I'll keep my ears open, she nodded. Andrea talks more freely around family. As I walked to my car, another text came through, this one from Walter. Found something interesting in Germain's old files. Come to the office ASAP. I smiled, thinking of the look on Andrea's face when she realized just how thoroughly her brother had outmaneuvered her. Germain had always said timing was everything, and he was right. The house wasn't just bricks and mortar. It was a promise to help women who needed a fresh start, just like I'd needed one when Germain first brought me home. Andrea saw it as a trophy to be won. I saw it as a mission to be fulfilled. Let her come by later. Let her make her threats and demands. Every move she made just brought us closer to the moment when everything would change. I started my car, Jermaine's letter safely tucked against my heart. "Watch me, my love," I whispered. "Watch me make it count." Walter's office smelled of old leather and coffee when I arrived. He was already pulling files from his cabinet, his reading glasses perched on his nose. "Look at this," he said without preamble, spreading documents across his desk. "Andrea's been busy. These are inquiries from 3 different real estate agencies, all dated within weeks of Jermaine's passing." I leaned forward, scanning the papers. "She's been getting valuations on my house?" "Your house," Walter emphasized, tapping the deed. "And that's not all. She's been asking about Jermaine's life insurance policy, your mortgage status, even your credit history." The door opened, and Walter's assistant poked her head in. "Ms. Andrea is here to see you, sir." Walter and I exchanged glances. "Perfect timing," he muttered. "Paris, the storage room, now." I slipped into the adjoining room just as Andrea's heels clicked across the wooden floor. Through the thin wall, their voices carried clearly. "Walter, darling?" Andrea's sugary tone made my teeth ache. "I need information about my brother's estate." "Everything's been settled according to the will, Andrea. Paris is the legal owner of the house." "Yes, but surely there are options. Paris is struggling, anyone can see that. It would be kinder to help her move on, downsize to something more manageable." Walter's chair creaked. "And I suppose you have a solution in mind?" "I've had several offers already, excellent ones. The market's hot right now, and that neighborhood is very desirable. If Paris sells now..." "If Paris sells," Walter's voice sharpened. "You seem very invested in property that isn't yours. That house belongs in the family. Real family. Not some charity case Jermaine married out of pity." My hands clenched into fists, but Walter's response was calm. "Careful, Andrea. That charity case is your brother's widow and the legal owner of the property. For now." Andrea's voice dropped. "But we both know she can't afford the upkeep. The property taxes alone are none of your concern." Walter's tone was final. "Now, if there's nothing else?" After Andrea left, I emerged from the storage room, shaking with anger. "She's been showing my house to buyers." "She's been trying to," Walter corrected, pulling out another folder. "But that's not what I called you here for. Look at this." He handed me a document dated 3 years ago. As I read, my eyes widened. "Jermaine knew," I whispered. "He knew she'd try something like this." "Your husband was a smart man." Walter smiled. "And he left us everything we need." My phone buzzed. A text from Eliza. "Documents filed. Also, you need to see this." Attached was a screenshot of Andrea's social media post. "Family dinner this Saturday. Time to discuss some exciting changes for the old Miller house." "She's planning something for Saturday," I said, showing Walter the post. "So are we." He handed me another envelope. "These are the final shelter proposals. Everything's ready." I drove home, my mind racing. Andrea's car was in my driveway, and she was sitting on my porch like she owned it. "We need to talk," she said as I approached. "No, we don't." I moved to pass her, but she blocked my path. "I have buyers ready to go. 7 figures, Paris. Think about it. You could start fresh somewhere else." I met her gaze. "Like Jermaine wanted me to start fresh somewhere else when you tried the same thing 15 years ago." She blinked. "What? Oh, you didn't think I knew about that. How you tried to convince him I was only after his money. How you showed him photos of me with my ex, claiming I was cheating." Color drained from her face. "He told you?" "He told me everything, and he left me everything I need to protect what we built." "You're bluffing," she said, but uncertainty crept into her voice. "Saturday's dinner should be interesting," I replied, finally pushing past her to unlock my door. "Hope you're ready for some exciting changes." "This isn't over," she called after me. "You're right about that," I muttered, closing the door in her face. Inside, I leaned against the wall, heart pounding. My phone buzzed again. Brooke this time. "Shelter permits approved. We're good to go. I looked at the family photo on the wall, at Jermaine's smiling face. He'd known this day would come, had prepared for it, had trusted me to see it through. Saturday couldn't come fast enough. Andrea thought she was orchestrating some grand takeover, but she had no idea she was walking right into our trap. I touched the documents in my bag, thinking of all the women who would soon find sanctuary here. "The house will be yours once I'm gone?" I whispered, remembering Andrea's words. "We'll see about that." 3 days before the family dinner, Greta showed up at my door with a box of old photographs and a worried expression. "You need to see this," she said, pushing past me into the living room. She spread the photos across the coffee table, pointing to one in particular. "Remember this?" The photograph showed Jermaine and me on our wedding day, but in the background, partially obscured, was Andrea holding what looked like papers. "Those documents she's holding," Greta's voice dropped. "They're the original deed to this house. I overheard her talking to her friend yesterday. She's planning to claim Jermaine promised her the house before he met you." I picked up the photo, studying it closer. "She's really getting desperate, isn't she?" The doorbell rang again. This time it was Brooke and Eliza, both looking flushed with excitement. "We found something huge," Brooke announced, pulling out her tablet. "Andrea's been hiding financial troubles, big ones." Eliza nodded, sitting down. "She's underwater on her own mortgage, 3 months behind on payments." "That explains the urgency," Greta said. "She's not just being spiteful, she needs money." I was about to respond when my phone rang. Walter's name flashed on the screen. "Paris," he said without preamble. "Andrea just left my office. She's claiming to have written proof that Jermaine promised her the house. Says she's presenting it at Saturday's dinner." "Let me guess. Dated before our wedding?" "Exactly. She's getting sloppy, Paris. Desperate people make mistakes." After hanging up, I turned to find 3 pairs of eyes watching me expectantly. "We need to move up our timeline," I said. "Eliza, how fast can you get those shelter permits processed?" "Already done," she replied. "But there's something else. I found an old letter in the courthouse records, from your mother-in-law to Jermaine, written just before she died." My heart skipped. "What did it say?" She knew what Andrea was like. She specifically asked Jermaine to keep the house away from her, said Andrea would destroy everything good about it. The front door opened, and we all jumped. It was Tom, Andrea's husband, looking uncomfortable. "Paris," he said, hovering in the doorway. "I need to tell you something. Andrea, she's been forging documents." The room went silent. Tom shifted nervously. "I found them in her office. Practice sheets trying to copy Jermaine's signature. She's planning to present a fake promise letter at the dinner." "Why are you telling me this?" I asked, studying his face. "Because Jermaine was my friend too. And because—" He pulled out his phone, showing us a text thread. "She's been lying to me about everything. The house, the money, all of it." Greta stood up. "Tom, we need you to tell us everything." For the next hour, Tom revealed Andrea's entire plan. The forged documents, the potential buyers, who didn't actually exist, the manufactured evidence of my supposed financial troubles. "She's presenting everything at dinner," he finished. "She thinks she has everyone convinced." "Perfect," I said, surprising them all. "Let her present her case. Let her show everyone exactly who she is." "Paris," Brooke warned. "That's risky." "No," Eliza interrupted, catching on. "It's brilliant. Let her commit to the lies publicly. Then we show everyone the truth," I finished. "All of it." I went to my study and returned with a small wooden box, the one Jermaine had given me on our last anniversary. "What's that?" Greta asked. I opened it, revealing a USB drive and a stack of letters. Insurance. Jermaine knew his sister better than anyone. He kept records of everything. Every threat, every scheme, every attempt to undermine our marriage. "Including the time she tried to break us up?" Tom asked quietly. I nodded. "Everything." My phone buzzed with a text from Andrea. "Hope you're ready for Saturday. Time to face reality." I showed the others, and Brooke laughed. "She has no idea what's coming, does she?" "No," I smiled, touching the wooden box. She doesn't. As everyone left, Greta hung back. Are you sure about this? Once you do this, there's no going back. The family will be torn apart. I looked at the wedding photo again, at Andrea's scheming face in the background. Andrea tore this family apart long ago, Greta. I'm just going to make sure everyone finally sees it. The truth would cost us all something, but as Jermaine always said, some prices are worth paying. Saturday would change everything, and I was ready. Let Andrea bring her forged documents and fake promises. I had something better, I had the truth, and it was time to set it free. Friday night's family meeting was Andrea's idea. A casual gathering before the big dinner tomorrow, she'd said. But as everyone filed into my living room, the tension was anything but casual. I thought we could all discuss the future of the house, Andrea announced, perching on the edge of my favorite armchair like she already owned it. As a family. Funny, I said, setting down a tray of coffee. I didn't realize my house was up for discussion. Our house, Andrea corrected sweetly. The Miller family house. Eliza, who'd insisted on being present as my lawyer, cleared her throat. Perhaps we should clarify the legal status. Oh, let's not get technical, Andrea interrupted, pulling out a folder. I have something more important to share. I caught Tom shifting uncomfortably on the couch, his eyes fixed on the folder. He knew what was coming. I found this in Jermaine's old things, Andrea continued, removing a letter. Dated 3 months before he met Paris. The paper trembled slightly in her hands as she read, Dear Andrea, you've always loved this house as much as I have. When the time comes, I want you to have it. It should stay in the family. Brooke snorted. Convenient timing. It's his signature, Andrea insisted, passing the letter around. You all know his handwriting. I sipped my coffee, watching as the letter made its way through the room. When it reached Greta, she studied it carefully. Interesting, Greta said. The ink looks remarkably fresh for a 15-year-old letter. Andrea's cheeks flushed. Well, I had to make a copy. The original was damaged. Of course it was, I murmured. The point is, Andrea pressed on, Jermaine wanted this house preserved as a family home, not turned into some shelter. The room went silent. I set down my cup slowly. How did you know about the shelter plans? Andrea's face paled slightly. I heard rumors. From going through my office, I asked, or from hiring that private investigator to dig through my papers. That's ridiculous, she sputtered. I would never. The investigator's name is Marcus, I cut in. He came to me last week, very apologetic. Seems his conscience got the better of him. Eliza pulled out her phone, playing a recorded conversation. Yeah, Ms. Andrea hired me to find dirt on her sister-in-law. Wanted anything that could prove financial instability. Andrea jumped to her feet. That's illegal. You can't record. Marcus recorded it, Eliza corrected, in a one-party consent state, totally legal. This is all very interesting, I said, standing up. But since we're sharing documents, I retrieved my own folder. I have something too. I pulled out a bank statement. This shows multiple withdrawals from your account to various real estate agents. Curious, since you claim to have buyers lined up, but none of these agents have any record of listing appointments. You went through my bank records. Andrea's voice rose. No need, Tom spoke up quietly. I showed them. Andrea whirled on her husband. You what? Enough, Andrea, he said firmly. No more lies. While we're at it, I continued, should we discuss the forged documents on your computer? The ones where you practiced Jermaine's signature? The color drained from Andrea's face. You can't prove. Actually, Eliza interrupted, Tom gave us access to your home office computer. The files are quite clear. Andrea's composure cracked. This house belongs with real family. Not some charity case who trapped my brother into marriage. Trapped him, I laughed. Is that what you told yourself when you tried to break us up? When you hired that woman to flirt with him at his office? What? Several voices exclaimed. Oh, yes, I nodded. Jermaine told me everything. He kept records too, Andrea. Of every scheme, every plot, every attempt to undermine our marriage. "You're lying," she whispered. I pulled out my phone, playing a video. Jermaine's face appeared on the screen, recorded months before his death. "Andrea's trying again, Paris. She thinks I don't know about the real estate agents, the plan she's making. But I know my sister. That's why tomorrow, we're meeting with Walter to make sure everything's legally set for the shelter. It's time to secure our legacy, honey. The right way." Andrea sank back into the chair, her face ashen. "Tomorrow's dinner should be interesting," I said quietly. "Especially when everyone sees what's in Jermaine's actual final letters." As people filed out, shaken and subdued, Andrea remained frozen in the chair. "Get out of my house," I said firmly. She looked up, hatred burning in her eyes. "This isn't over." "You're right," I agreed. "Tomorrow it will be." After she left, Brooke hugged me tight. "Are you ready for tomorrow?" I touched the USB drive in my pocket, the one containing everything we'd need to end this once and for all. "More than ready," I replied. It's time everyone knew the truth. Saturday morning brought dark clouds and distant thunder. I was in the kitchen preparing for the dinner when Brooke burst through the back door, soaking wet from the rain. "Andrea's called everyone in the family," she said, shaking water from her hair. "She's telling them you forged Jermaine's video." I continued chopping vegetables. "Let her. Paris, she's saying she has proof that you manipulated the footage, that you're trying to steal her inheritance." The knife paused mid-chop. "Did she mention how she got into my email account?" Brooke's eyes widened. "What?" "Walter called earlier. Someone tried to access my private emails with Jermaine. The IP address traced back to Andrea's house." The back door opened again, and Eliza rushed in, clutching her briefcase. "We have a problem. Andrea's filed an emergency injunction to stop any changes to the property." "On what grounds?" I asked, wiping my hands. "She's claiming mental incompetence. Says Jermaine wasn't in his right mind when he made those final arrangements with you." The thunder crashed closer, making us all jump. My phone rang. It was Walter. "Paris, turn on the local news. Now." I grabbed the remote, switching on the kitchen TV. Andrea's face filled the screen, standing outside her real estate office. "My brother's widow is attempting to destroy our family's legacy," she was saying, tears in her eyes. "This historic home has been in our family for generations, and now she wants to turn it into a transient housing facility. My brother would never have wanted this." "She's really doing this," Brooke whispered. My phone buzzed with messages from family members. "Is this true? How could you do this to Jermaine's memory? We need to talk." "Perfect," I said, surprising both Brooke and Eliza. "Perfect?" Eliza asked. "Paris, she's turning the family against you publicly." "No," I smiled, pulling out my phone. "She's making sure everyone's watching." I dialed Walter. "Move everything up. We're doing it before dinner." "Are you sure?" he asked. The storm is perfect. Everyone's already on their way here to avoid the weather. Text the family. Emergency meeting at 4 instead of dinner at 6. I turned to Brooke and Eliza. "Call Greta and Tom. Tell them it's time." The next few hours were a blur of preparation. By 3:30, the storm was directly overhead, and my house was ready. Walter arrived first, carrying a projector and screen. "Everything's set," he said, setting up in the living room. "Are you ready for this?" "I've been ready for 15 years, I replied. The doorbell started ringing as family members arrived, shaking off umbrellas and rain jackets. Andrea came last, flanked by 2 men in suits. "My lawyers," she announced smugly, "just in case." "Perfect," I said again. "Please, everyone sit down." The room was packed. Every family member who'd received Andrea's calls was there, along with her lawyers and our core support group. "Before Andrea continues her public campaign," I began, "there's something you all need to see." Walter dimmed the lights and started the projector. Jermaine's face appeared on the screen, but this wasn't the short clip from yesterday. This was different. "If you're watching this," he began, "then everything I predicted has happened. Andrea, sis, I love you, but I know what you're doing right now. I know because you've done it before." The room went silent except for the storm outside. Paris and I made plans for this house years ago. Real plans, not the fake documents you're probably waving around right now. Andrea's lawyer shifted uncomfortably. But this isn't just about the house, Germaine continued. This is about the truth. Walter, show them. Walter pressed a button, and documents began appearing on screen. Bank records, emails, photos, all documenting Andrea's schemes over the years. Oh my God, someone whispered. The house was never going to be yours, Andrea, Germaine's voice continued, because you never understood what it really meant. It's not about property value or family legacy. It's about helping others, like this family helped me. Lightning flashed outside as the final document appeared, the original shelter proposal, dated 5 years ago, signed by both Germaine and me. Paris, Germaine's voice softened, show them the letter. I stood up, pulling out an envelope I'd never shown anyone. This, I said, is what Germaine wrote the day before he died. Andrea jumped to her feet. Stop. I forbid. You forbid nothing. I cut her off. Not anymore. The storm raged outside, but inside, the truth was finally breaking free. I opened the letter, and as I began to read, Andrea's carefully constructed world started crumbling around her. The letter shook slightly in my hands as I began to read. To my family, if you're hearing this, then Andrea has done exactly what I knew she would. She's tried to take everything from Paris, just like she's tried to take everything from everyone her entire life. But this time, I was ready. The house you're all sitting in right now, it was never meant to be just a house. When I was 16, this place saved my life. Mum and Dad took in runaways, abused women, anyone who needed shelter. Andrea hated it. She called them parasites, said they were beneath us. But Paris? The first time I told her about Mum and Dad's mission, she cried. She understood, because she'd been one of those women once before I met her. She'd escaped an abusive relationship with nothing but a backpack and hope. Andrea, I know you're listening. I know about the private investigator you hired last year to dig up Paris's past. You thought you'd find dirt. Instead, you found the truth about why this house matters so much to both of us. Remember when you tried to break us up by showing me those photos of Paris with her ex? You didn't know he was the man she'd run from, the man this house helped her hide from. Paris and I have spent years preparing this place to become a proper shelter. The blueprints are done, the permits are filed, the funding is secured, and it's all legally binding. Andrea's lawyers exchanged glances, shuffling their papers nervously. But that's not all, I continued reading. Walter, show them the trust documents. Walter clicked to the next slide, displaying financial records that made Andrea gasp. The house, the trust fund, everything you thought you could claim, it's all been legally transferred to the Shelter Foundation. Paris isn't just the owner, she's the executive director of a fully funded non-profit organization. Thunder crashed outside as Andrea lunged forward. He was sick, he wasn't thinking clearly. Actually, Walter interrupted, standing up. These documents were signed and notarized 3 years ago, when Germaine was in perfect health. I have the medical records to prove it. I kept reading. And Andrea, that trust fund you've been counting on, the one you've already spent in your head, I've donated it all to the shelter's operational costs. Every penny. No, Andrea whispered, sinking back into her chair. You can't. I can, and I did, Germaine's words continued, because some things are more important than greed. Some things are about legacy, the real kind, not the kind you can sell to the highest bidder. The room was dead silent except for the storm outside and Andrea's ragged breathing. Paris, I read the final paragraphs, my voice steady. I know you'll make this work. You understand what this house means, what it can do. You lived it. And now you'll help others live it too. To my family, support her, help her. Be the people Mom and Dad raised us to be. And Andrea, I forgive you, but I won't let you hurt anyone else. Love, Germaine. I folded the letter as Andrea's lawyers stood up, gathering their things. Miss Andrea, one said quietly, we'll be withdrawing our services. The injunction was filed under false pretenses. "You can't!" Andrea screamed, jumping to her feet. "I'll pay you double." "With what money?" Tom asked softly. "You've spent everything we had on this vendetta." Andrea spun toward him. "Shut up, just shut up." "No," he said, standing. "I'm done being quiet. I'm done watching you destroy people." "The shelter opens next month," I announced to the room. "Anyone who wants to help is welcome. This house has always been about helping people. Now it's official." Family members began standing, moving away from Andrea, some coming to hug me, others just nodding in support. "This isn't over," Andrea snarled, grabbing her purse. "I'll fight this." "No," Walter said firmly, "you won't, because the next document I file will be a restraining order, and after that, fraud charges for those forged documents." Andrea's face crumpled. She looked around the room, finding no allies, no support. With a choked sob, she ran for the door, slamming it behind her. The storm outside was beginning to clear as sunlight broke through the clouds. "Paris," Greta said, hugging me tight. "Germaine would be so proud." I looked around the room, at the family members wiping tears, at Tom's relieved smile, at Brooke and Eliza's triumphant grins. "The house isn't mine anymore," I said. "It belongs to everyone who needs it, just like it always should have." Outside, a rainbow appeared as the storm cleared, arching over the house like a promise kept. Somewhere, I knew Germaine was smiling. The war was over. Now the real work could begin. The morning of the shelter's opening, I stood in the foyer, running my fingers over the wallpaper Andrea had once criticized. The house smelled of fresh paint and new beginnings. "First resident arrives in an hour," Brooke said, checking her clipboard. "You ready?" Before I could answer, the doorbell rang. Tom stood on the porch, holding a box of photo albums. "These belong here," he said quietly. "Andrea, she took them when Germaine got sick. I found them in our attic." I opened the top album. There was Germaine as a teenager, helping his mother make up beds for their unofficial guests. Another showed him and his father installing the security system that would later become the foundation for our upgraded version. "She tried to erase this part of the house's history," Tom said. "But I thought, maybe the new residents would like to know the story." "They'll know," I assured him. "Every part of it." The sound of cars pulling up made us turn. Greta and Eliza were leading a group of volunteers, carrying welcome baskets and supplies. Behind them, Walter's car parked, and he emerged with a familiar wooden box. "Found this in the office," he said, handing it to me. "Thought it belonged here." Inside was a stack of thank you notes, dozens of them, written to Germaine's parents over the years from women they'd helped. The front door opened again. A young woman in a police uniform stepped in. "Officer Sarah," she introduced herself. "I'm here about the shelter's security protocols, but—" She hesitated, looking around. "I also wanted to say thank you. I stayed here once, 20 years ago, when the Millers took me in. This place saved my life." Tears pricked my eyes as I showed her the thank you notes. "Would you add yours to the collection?" As she wrote, more volunteers arrived. The house hummed with activity, beds being made, supplies being organized, security systems being tested. "Paris," Eliza called from the study. "There's someone here to see you." I walked in to find Andrea's daughter, Rachel, standing awkwardly by the desk. "Mum's in therapy," she said without preamble. "Real therapy this time. Dad insisted." She pulled out an envelope. "She wanted me to give you this, but she was too ashamed to come herself." The letter was brief. "Paris, I was wrong. About everything. I let greed poison what should have been sacred. Germaine knew who I really was, and he tried to help me see it too. I'm trying now. I'm sorry. Andrea." "She means it," Rachel said quietly. For the first time in her life, I think she actually means it. The doorbell chimed again. Our first resident had arrived. Through the window, I saw a young woman clutching a small bag, her eyes darting nervously. "That was me once," I said to Rachel. "Scared, alone, not sure who to trust." Can I help?" Rachel asked. Volunteer here sometimes. Of course, I smiled. That's what family does. We walked to the front door together. The young woman flinched as I opened it, but her eyes widened as she took in the warm, bright interior. Welcome home, I said softly. I'm Paris, and this... I gestured to the volunteers, the photos, the thank you notes, all the pieces of history and hope woven together. This is your safe place now. She stepped inside, trembling. I don't know how to thank you. Just live, I told her. Live and heal, and someday, when you're ready, help someone else do the same. As we showed her to her room, I caught sight of Jermaine's photo on the wall. He was standing in this very spot, arms open wide, that brilliant smile lighting up his face. The house didn't feel like a battleground anymore. The war with Andrea, the pain, the struggle, it had all transformed into something stronger, something healing. Paris, Brooke called. 2 more arrivals. I touched Jermaine's photo briefly. Watch this, my love. Watch how many lives we're going to change. The front door opened again, bringing with it more stories, more chances for healing. The house embraced them all, just as it had embraced me all those years ago. This wasn't an ending. It was a beginning. For the residents, for Andrea, for all of us. And as I welcomed another scared, hopeful face into our sanctuary, I knew this was exactly what coming home was supposed to feel like. The house wasn't just mine anymore. It belonged to every woman who would walk through that door, carrying nothing but hope and the courage to start again. Just like I had once done. Just like I would help others do, every single day, in this house that love had built.